welcome to our summer edition of NWBUC Sunday School. My name is Lori, and I'm really happy to be with you here today. We have 2 episodes of NWBU Sunday School, this one and one in August. And we hope that you've really been enjoying your summer so far. We hope that you've had fun in this beautiful weather we've been having and enjoying every minute of it. And we are going to be talking about enjoying everything around you and how when we enjoy the world around us, we get a glimpse of what it means to be a child of God. I have a story to read today, and in that story, it talks about a little boy and his mom and dad and how the little boy experiences God in the world around him. And I thought it was a beautiful story, and I remembered back to the questions that my children asked when they were small. One of them was, "Mom, where is God? If we can't see God with our eyes, then how do we know God is there?" And I would sometimes describe God like the wind, that we can't see God, of course, with our eyes, but we feel God's presence all around us, just like the wind. We feel the wind blowing on our face. We see it blowing through the trees. And that's like the presence of God and God's love, that we may not necessarily see it with our eyes, but we experience it in different ways. And that's what the story that we're reading is all about. So I thought maybe it would be a neat challenge for you this week to think about what you think about God's presence. How is God present in your life, and how do you feel God's love? And there might be many ways that we experience this, whether it's through the beauty of the world or the love of our family. But what this story tells us is that no matter where we are, God is always there. And one of my favorite songs that we often sing in Sunday school is the song by Natalie Sleeth called "Everywhere I Go." And it reminds us that no matter what we do, no matter where we go and what we experience, God's love is always there. That from the moment we're born, we are born knowing God's love and being loved by God. And it goes with us all through our lives. God walks alongside us and helps us in everything we do. So I'm going to read this story with you. It's called "The Boy and the Ocean." And after we read it together, we'll talk a little bit about some of the images in the book. So like I said, the book that we're going to be reading today is called "The Boy and the Ocean," and it's by Max Lucado. The little boy rolled over in his bed and opened his eyes. Through his window, he could see the ocean. Big and blue rolling waves, water crashing on the beach. The little boy stood at the window and searched for the end of the ocean. He couldn't see it. He could see the ships on it. He could see the birds above it. He could see the horizon stretched across it. But the little boy couldn't see the end of it. He couldn't see the end of the ocean. "Would you like to play in the ocean?" his mother asked. The little boy stood at the edge of the water with his mother. She took his hand and they waded into the surf. When the water covered his feet, he looked up at her. When it reached his knees, he took a breath and squeezed her hand. When the wave rushed against his chest, he laughed, and she did too. The two sat in the sand and let the waves splash around them. "God's love is like the ocean, my little boy," she said. "It's always there. It's always deep. It never ends. God's love is special." The little boy spent the day playing near the ocean. He counted starfish. He built castles. He searched for shells. But most of all, he watched the ocean. He could see the clouds above it. He could feel the tide within it. He could taste the salt inside it. But he could never see the end of it. He could never see the end of the ocean. That night, as the moonlight stretched across the sea and landed on his face, he listened to the waves slap, slap against the sand. "Go to sleep, my little boy," his mother whispered. "The ocean will not leave. The ocean will not change. The ocean is like God's love, always here, always deep. It never ends. God's love is special." And so the little boy slept with the sound of the ocean in his ears. The next day, the little boy looked out at a different window, at the mountains. High and tall, white-tipped, touching the clouds. The little boy looked from side to see the end of the mountains. He couldn't see it. He could see the trees growing among them. He could see the snow glistening on top of them. He could see the birds flying around them. But he couldn't see the end of the mountains. "Would you like to hike to the mountains?" his father asked. He took the boy's hand, and together they started up the mountain trail. When the leaves scattered over the boy's feet, he looked up at his father. When the wind shook the tall trees, he took a breath and squeezed his father's hand. When they looked out over the great valley, the father smiled. The boy did too. The two sat on a rock and looked around them. "God's love is like the mountains, my little boy," the father said. "It's always here. It's always big. It never ends. God's love is special." The two spent the day playing in the mountains. The boy splashed in the creek. He picked flowers in the meadow. He listened to the birds singing. But most of all, he looked at the mountains. He looked to see the sky above them. He could feel the wind blow through them. He could hear the water that bubbled between them. But he could never see the end of them. He could never see the end of the mountains. That night, as the moon appeared from behind the peaks, the boy thought of the mountains and smiled. "Go to sleep, my little boy. The mountains will not leave. The mountains will not change," his father whispered. "The mountains are like God's love, always here, always tall. It never ends. God's love is special." And so the boy slept with thoughts of mountains in his dreams. The next day, he ran on the beach and swam in the water. He chased his puppy up the mountain trail and looked for flowers. When the day ended, he and his parents lay on the grass and looked at the night sky. Stars were everywhere, twinkling, shimmering, diamonds in the dark. He looked as far as he could see to the end of the sky, but he couldn't see it. He could see the moon, yellow and round. He could see clouds, puffy and large. He saw a star race from one side of the sky to the other, but he couldn't see the end of the sky. "Would you like to count the stars?" his mother and father asked. So they tried. 1 dozen over there, 2 dozen over there. There were too many. When he reached 100, the boy looked up at his mother. When the wind turned chilly, his father held him close. His parents looked up into the big sky and became quiet. So did he for a while. But then the boy spoke. God's love is like the night sky, he told them. It's always here. It's always big. It never ends. God's love is special. The boy, the mother, and the father stayed for a long, long time near the ocean, close to the mountains, beneath the sky, surrounded by God's love, and they smiled. The end. So that story by Max Lucado describes God's love as something that is deeper than the deepest ocean and bigger than the tallest mountain and brighter than the brightest stars at night. God's love is so special because it is always there, just like the ocean, just like the mountains, just like the stars at night. God's love never leaves us. And I think that's one of the most important lessons of our faith, the most important one that you can ever remember, that no matter where you are, that no matter what you do, God's love will reach you, that from the moment you were born, God has loved you, and that God's love continues to walk with you through your whole life. And it's something that we can discover as we enjoy the world, as you go outside during the summer and enjoy the beauty of the water as you swim and enjoy the sunshine, and maybe as you go for a hike. And remember that God is all around you, that God is the water, and God is the sunshine, and God is in the fresh air. No matter where we go, God is there. We are never alone. So I want you to hold that thought tight throughout these beautiful summer days, that as you have those wonderful adventures, God is there with you, experiencing them with you, watching over you, caring for you. And I hope that you always feel that unconditional love of God. So now we're going to watch this week's version of What's Going On at Your House, and it is going to be presented by the White Wilson family, and they are Kelsey, Haley, Sadie, Milena, and Elodie. So I invite you to watch What's Going On at their house. So I'd like to thank the White Wilson family for sharing what goes on at their house. And I'm going to leave you now with the thought that God's love is always with you. No matter where you go and what you do and the fun you have or even the difficult times you go through, God is holding you with love. And I hope that you never forget and always feel that love within you and around you, that no matter what is going on in your life, that you feel embraced and loved by God. That's the greatest gift of our faith, to know that we are loved and that we can share that love. So I hope you have a great rest of the summer, and I will see you again in August when we have the next summer installment of Virtual Sunday School. Bye-bye.